Hello, I'm Eddie O'Sullivan, and this is This Week in the Italian Campaign. Dinner this week in the Italian Campaign, brought to you by the Freedom for Italy Network. Episode 47, The Advance to the Arno Line, with my guest, Second World War historian and author Gareth Scanlon. But first, a roundup of other events 80 years ago this week. On the 20th of July 1944, an attempt to assassinate Adolf Hitler with a bomb at the Wolfslayer base in what was then East Prussia failed. Conspirators led by Klaus von Stauffenberg nevertheless pressed ahead with a plan for a regime change in Berlin, but they were captured and executed. On the 23rd of July, the Bretton Woods Conference in New Hampshire ended with the creation of the Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which would become the IMF and the World Bank. On the 23rd of July, King George VI arrived by air from North Africa to begin a tour of Allied armies, which began the next morning with an inspection of the British fleet in Naples. The next day, he flew with Commander-in-Chief Harold Alexander to the Allied Advance Headquarters in Viterbo. Tonight, his Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Harding. On the 25th, the King travelled to Ten Corps headquarters, where he knighted its commander, Richard McCreary. Later that day, he visited the 4th Indian Division at Palazzo del Pero, north of Perugia, and was then driven by 8th Army Commander Oliver Leese to near Arezzo, where he spent the night. On the 26th of July, the King visited Britain's 4th Infantry Division at Monte San Savino, overlooking Lake Trasimeno, where he decorated Richard Wakeford of the Hampshire Regiment and Francis Jefferson of the Lancashire Fusiliers with the Victoria Cross for bravery during the Battle for Cassino in May. He knighted Leese. Later that day at Siena, he decorated Kamal Ram of the 8th Indian Division with the Victoria Cross, also for bravery at Cassino. On the 27th of July, the King inspected units of 2 Polish corps near Castiglione di Lago, in the company of Commander-in-Chief of the Polish Armed Forces, Kazimierz Sosnowski, and the Corps Commander, Władysław Anders. The following day, he flew to Cecina to meet 5th Army Commander Mark Clark. On the 30th of July, the King flew from Viterbo to Nettuno near Anzio, where he visited 5th Corps and the 1st British Infantry Division before driving to Tivoli east of Rome to Britain's 56th Division. That night, he flew from Latina to Viterbo. On the 31st, the King travelled by air to Alife, south of Cassino, to inspect the Canadian Corps before travelling by car to Naples. He left Italy the following day. By the 25th of July, units of the 5th Army had cleared resistance south of the River Arno. It paused while the attack towards the Gothic Line was planned, and the 8th Army moved up across the Apennines and along the Adriatic coast. The immediate obstacle was the Arno Line, which ran from the mouth of the northern bank of the Arno through the Apennines to the north bank of the Mataro River on the Adriatic coast. The Arno between the Tyrrhenian Sea and Florence was up to 250 feet wide. By late summer, the river was shallow enough to be forded by foot, but its levees rose to 30 feet. The plain north of the Arno was held by 5 divisions of Germany's 14th Army, commanded by Joachim Lemmelsen. The 5th Army order of battle by the end of July comprised 34 Division from the mouth of the Arno to Cascina, with outposts in the outskirts of Pisa, 91 Division from Cascina to Angelica, and 88 Division, which held the sector from Angelica to the 5th Army boundary east of San Miniato. 34 and 91 divisions were under 4 Corps. 88 Division was placed under 2 Corps, commanded by General Keyes. The 5th Army had been depleted during its advance north of Rome. Its commander, Mark Clark, ordered for it to be completely reordered. The French Expeditionary Corps on the 5th Army's right had by then been replaced by 13 Corps of the 8th Army. Task Force 45, a new formation based on the 45th Anti-Aircraft Artillery Brigade, which was converted into infantry, relieved 34 Division formations. It was supplemented by repurposed British anti-aircraft formations, and later by the 1st Battalion of the 100th Infantry Regiment, a unit made up of men of Japanese descent that had been in almost continuous combat since the 26th of June. Task Force Ramey, another formation that included veterans and armour commanded by Rufus Ramey, took over 91 Division's sector under 2 Corps' command. It was subsequently shifted east to take over 88 Division's sector. 2 Corps also had control of the 85th Division, which was behind 91 Division, and 1st Armoured Division was southeast of Cecina to complete its reorganization under 4 Corps. The 5th Army's attention shifted toward administering Livorno and repairing its port, which had been damaged by Allied bombing and comprehensively mined by the Germans before they withdrew on the 19th of July. Advance units of 4 Corps concluded that Pisa was only lightly held and that suggestions that the Leaning Tower was being used as an observation post were false. Orders were issued for no artillery fire to be directed at the city. On the 8th Army front in the final week of July, 13 Corps advanced against German rearguards to fall into line with the 5th Army's advance to the left. By the end of the month, it had reached the Paola Line, the last 14th Army holding position south of Florence, which ran along high points from the boundary with the 5th Army to Impruneta. The Corps' advance formations were 8 Indian Division with the support of the 1st Canadian Armoured Brigade, 2 New Zealand Division with 2 Armoured Brigade, and the 6th South African Armoured Division with 24 Guards Brigade. The attack against the Paola Line, led by the New Zealanders, began on a 4-mile front on the 27th of July. The Pesa River was crossed in the afternoon and Chibaya was entered that evening. The New Zealanders reached San Michele on the evening of the 28th of July and were subject to 8 counterattacks involving infantry and tanks the following day, in the division's bitterest fighting since Cassino in March. They also advanced to San Casciano. As the New Zealanders struck again on the night of the 1st of August, the 8th Indian Division went into action on their left. Units of the 21st Indian Brigade, supported by all 3 squadrons of Canada's 3 Rivers regiments, secured a bridgehead over the Pesa at Ginestra. By daybreak on the 3rd, the New Zealanders and the South Africans had broken through the main Paola Line and were driving towards Florence. On the 4th of August, a troop of tanks from New Zealand's 19th Battalion reached the city's Ponte della Vittoria on the Arno's south bank and reported all bridges across the river had been demolished, apart from the historic Ponte Vecchio to the east. Around the same time, the South African Division sent the Imperial Light Horse Kimberley Regiment to probe into the city on the morning of the 4th of August. The story of the capture of Florence will be told in the next episode of This Week in the Italian Campaign. To the right, Britain's 4th Infantry Division in 13 Corps advanced to high ground overlooking the Arno east of Florence, while 6th Armoured Division, which had recently been transferred from 10 Corps, moved forward to its right. 10 Corps, now comprising just the 4th and 10th Indian Divisions and a brigade of reconnaissance troops, pushed through the mountainous territory to the east. On the Adriatic front, 2 Polish corps crossed the Asino River on the 19th of July and encountered strong German opposition near Austria. On the 22nd, the Poles reached the Misa River, which was held by Germany's 71 Infantry Division and the 1st Parachute Division. Senigallia, 20 miles north of Ancona, was captured on the 5th of August, but the Poles were still 10 miles south of the Gothic Line. Initial plans for the assault on the Gothic Line called for the Allied armies to attack on a front from Pistoia to Dicomano by the shortest route between Florence and Bologna. Using 2 fresh corps, the Canadian and the 5th British, 5 divisions already under its command, and the 1st British Army Division, which was arriving in Italy, the 8th Army was to carry the bulk of the attack through the mountains and advance to the Po. The weakened 5th Army, now reduced to 1 armoured and 4 infantry divisions, were thrust towards Modena, but would not be expected to advance further. The Germans were encouraged to believe large forces were being concentrated on the Adriatic coast behind 2 Polish corps by road traffic, the activity of signal detachments, and reconnaissance parties sent from the Canadian Corps and the British 1st Infantry and 1st Armoured Divisions. Alarmed by signs that the Allies actually planned to attack on the Adriatic coast, German Supreme Commander in Italy, Albert Kesselring, agreed for Germany's 10th Army to be reinforced by the 1st Parachute Division. Possibly the Canadian Armoured Division is there, he told 10th Army Commander Heinrich von Wittinghoff on the 22nd of July. We hear constantly about the Canadians being in the rear area, von Wittinghoff replied, but it is quite possible that they are being saved for the attack further up the coast. By the end of July, the 51st Mountain Corps mistakenly reported that Britain's 1st Division was actually in the line with the Italian Liberation Corps on the Polish left. Kesselring decided that his forces on the Adriatic coast must therefore be deployed in depth, and measures were taken to meet the possibility of amphibious landings in the region of Rimini and Ravenna. 8th Army Commander Oliver Leese was unconvinced that the Gothic Line and plan of attack would work. On the 4th of August, he met Allied Commander-in-Chief Harold Alexander in Orvieto and argued that a frontal attack through the mountains with the 2 armies operating so close together might be too risky. The 8th Army had little experience of large-scale operations in mountains. The pack transport trains and similar requirements for such ventures were inadequate. The mountains would also prevent the army from exploiting its superiority in armour and artillery. Lee said the Adriatic coastal route offered a more familiar battlefield, the chance of set-piece artillery cannonades, and the prospect of Allied armour breaking out into the northern plain. Alexander agreed. On the new plan, he said, we should be able to employ what I call the strategy of the 2-handed punch, or, more orthodoxly expressed, the strategy of attacking 2 points equally vital to the enemy, i.e. Ravenna and Bologna, either simultaneously or alternately, in order to split the reserves available for the defence. The attack on the Gothic Line was to begin in mid-August. I am now joined from Wales by Gareth Scanlon, a Second World War historian and author of a new book about the use of camouflage smocks by infantry formations in the Italian campaign. Well, that's the story of what was happening this 80 years ago this week. And I'm now joined by Gareth. There he is. Interesting background there, Gareth. I assume those are not real people behind you.
Sorry, forgive me. No, they're quite friendly. No, they're not.
Okay, Gareth, look, I've got some slides that I'm going to share. But first of all, just tell us a little about yourself. You're quite close to Swansea in West Wales. Is that correct?
That's right. I live in a town called Ammanford, which is a bit north west of Swansea. Then it's largely a Welsh-speaking area, but very nice part of the world. I was born and bred here, so I've sort of remained. But I'm really delighted to be on the show with you tonight, Eddie. So thank you very much. And I know that when we had some discussion before, obviously coming online, I know that you wanted me to cover a little bit about the history of the 6th Armoured Division in Italy, a bit about the 1st Guards Brigade, my affiliation with that through my two of my great-grandfathers who fought with the Welsh Guards there, and a bit about my recent visit to Arezzo, which I appreciate was last week, if you like, in the Italian campaign. But nonetheless, I think I've got some interesting bits and bobs and pictures for your viewers.
Okay, well, let's see if we can make this work.
Fantastic.
Okay, well, very handsome photograph of you taken, I believe, last week when you in Arezzo. And that's your book. Tell us about your book, first of all. Camouflage Fist, just published.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. It was taken just last week, and it was actually taken at the site of the cover image on the left-hand side of the book there. So I'll come on to it in more detail in a bit, I suppose. But essentially, I've been studying my great-grandfather, Glynsbowert, for a number of years now, and he fought with the Welsh Guards throughout the Italian campaign, and indeed at Boulogne with the 2nd Battalion Welsh Guards, and in Tunisia before coming to Italy. And I've there's very little information on the Welsh Guards in Italy out there, which is something I'm looking to redress as quickly as possible.
Very good. So the book Camouflage Fist, where can you buy that, by the way? Amazon, I assume?
Yeah, it's available directly from Helion. You can get signed copies directly from me. It's available at all good bookstores, WH Smith's, Amazon, etc.
And the what you did, I mean, you tell the story, of course, of the 6th Armoured, which you got a great focus on. But you look very closely, in a way which is really unusual, at the use of camouflage jackets and smocks during the Italian campaign. And you've got, holding your left hand in that fine photograph, you've got a piece of original camouflage from the Second World War. So the book is, tell us about the what you discovered or what you explain in your book.
Okay, well, it's a really it was something that's never been covered before. So that photograph there, I ordered it up from the Imperial War Museum, having seen it in a number of other books, albeit poorly reproduced. And I was able to recognize my grandfather. He's actually sat forth from the left there with no headwear. And he was wearing one of these peculiar Italian camouflage smocks. And of course, as one does, one turns immediately to sort of Google and books and bits and bobs. And there was very little out there about this garment whatsoever. So then I spent 2 years trawling through war diaries to battalion level and consuming just about everything I could on the 6th Armoured Division to piece together the story of why, how they came to be, to being used, what the drivers were. I managed to find out that they were made in a factory in Naples, a Royal Army Ordnance Corps factory. So, and what I've learned through that sort of process is that there was much innovation in the Italian campaign, and I think that the Italian campaign overall, over the last, as well since the war, hasn't really received the attention that it should, and I think that it's viewed as almost how can I say a colourless campaign, and actually what I've learned is the level of innovation all the way down strategic, tactical and operational is absolutely significant in Italy. And I suppose this is what I'm going to speak about tonight, is some of that innovation.
Okay, well, let's go on to the next slide. Now, here's an opportunity for you to talk about your great grandfathers. Two of them.
Right. Two of them.
Professional soldiers. And you've got the photographs, one with a gentleman in his Welsh Guards uniform with his bearskin.
Yes.
And the 4 buttons, the groups of 4 buttons in the front. If you want to know the difference between a Welsh Guardsman and any other guard, then you can look at the bearskin and the feather, or you can count the buttons. So 4 buttons, it means that is the it was the 4th Guards Regiment formed, wasn't it?
Well, I think, forgive me, I think it's 5 buttons for the Welsh Guards, I think.
No, it's 5. You're right. You are right. I was counting. I start again. 5 buttons down the front.
So 5 buttons. So on the left there, then that's Glynsbowert, one of my great grandfathers. Now I was very lucky to know him into adulthood. He died when I was in my early 20s. and he joined the Welsh Guards at 18 years of age in 1934. So by the time that World War II had kicked off, he'd already had 6 years in, so to speak. So he was a really, really kind gentleman, a really imposing man, very, very quiet. He was probably the softest person I'd ever know. I remember as a small child sitting there eating. He used to bake cakes and he used to love his gardening. He was the gentlest soul. But of course, what I've learned over the years is that, the things that he was exposed to in the Italian campaign, I'm not surprised that he liked baking and that he liked gardening, because I think they're two ultimately peaceful things. And I think his life during the Second World War was anything other than peaceful. So as he sort of neared the end of his life, then I did ask him a lot of questions about the Italian campaign and about his time overall in the war, and he did actually tell me quite a lot of stuff which I noted down and jotted down, and I'm so glad that I had that experience. And then my other great grandfather, I was never to meet Sam Davis there on the right. He died before I was born in 1972, but his wife there, Elaine, my great grandmother, I did meet her numerous times. They emigrated to South Africa. Now, the really interesting thing about Sam and the story about my other great grandfather is that I didn't know that he served in the 3rd Battalion Welsh Guards until just after Christmas last year, 2023. My great uncle regrettably passed away out in South Africa, and whilst my cousin Emma was clearing the house there, they found a number of documents to him showing that he had fought in Italy. Now, we knew that my great grandmother Elaine was a servant, a maid at Buckingham Palace. So putting 2 and 2 together, we think that they might have actually met at that location when he was on duty there, so to speak. So this is something really brand new to me. So unfortunately, I'm still waiting on his military record from the National Archives, because it takes an extraordinary amount of time now. But I don't know a great deal about his service, although I know he was in the Welsh Guards and he served in Italy for sure. So
do you know if Glyn and Sam knew each other?
Oh, they definitely knew each other. So I spoke to my great aunt recently, and I said, "Look, did Glyn and Sam know each other?" And there's a small industrial club in the little village that I was born and bred in, called Brynaman. And there was another Welsh Guardsman who fought in Italy there as well, who was an uncle of somebody else I know, as it happened. And they all used to sit together, so they did know each other, yes. And when you look at the Welsh Guards as a battalion, then you're looking 1,000 strong. They took 1,000 casualties, and at the end of the Italian campaign, I think there was only about 350 of them left. So there's every chance that they could have served in the same company together. And I haven't got any photos of Sam from his wartime years. And I wonder, given all of the photographs that I have of the Welsh Guards in Italy, I just wonder if he's in any of them. I just can't wait to find out more.
Well, what a terrific story, and my goodness. And they were both professional soldiers, is that correct?
Yes, I believe Sam was, yes. But Glyn definitely was, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the Guards, and of course the Guards, in the for those who don't know the history of the British Army, the Guards are a class and they're of their own. The elite infantry formation of the British Army, and they would classify themselves as the greatest infantry soldiers in the world. So they will have great pride in their service. There's no doubt at all, and always on parade, always beautifully turned out. Lovely photograph.
No, it's great. I mean, and the 3rd Battalion, that's an interesting one in itself, because at the outbreak of war, then you had the 1st and the 2nd Battalion. The 1st Battalion were evacuated via Dunkirk. The 2nd Battalion actually went into Boulogne to try and hold the port. Glyn was at Boulogne, and then realised that they couldn't, as they were counterattacked by tanks, and got back on the vessels and on their way back to Blighty. And then I think after the debacle of Dunkirk, the holding battalion for the regiment for new recruits was turned into an infantry battalion, the 3rd Battalion. So you had, at that point then, you had the 1st, which was infantry. The 2nd was converted into an armoured formation, and indeed they served with the Guards Armoured Division in Normandy. Put in 6-foot-plus guardsmen in tanks probably isn't the best idea in the world, in my opinion, but there we go. They were a very successful unit. And of course, the 3rd Battalion then was formed. And I think with Glyn, certainly, as an experienced pre-war non-commissioned officer, as is often the case, to form that new battalion, they pull on a nucleus of experienced troops to sort of form that real sort of centre. And Glyn then joined the 3rd Battalion, went to Tunisia, fought out in Tunisia. He was wounded at Hamam Leaf. And it's interesting because I've been speaking to the family of an officer, well, the officer who commanded number 1 company, David Gibson Watt, who was an MC 2 bar, and he was there leading that attack at Hamam Leaf. And Glyn was wounded there, and obviously went to Italy and went all the way to Austria and came back in July 45. So, yeah, anyway, sorry, I rabbited on here.
No, the interesting thing is that the 3rd Battalion of the Welsh Guards was in the 1st Guards Brigade.
That's right.
And the 1st Guards Brigade initially in Tunisia was in the 78th Division. And they transferred out. And the Irish Brigade moved into the 78th Division to replace the 1st Guards Brigade, and then moved into 6th Armoured. That's an obscure piece of information. Not many people know that. Okay, let's move on. Let's have some more slides. Okay, well, this is. I'm not sure what you're going to say about this, but it tells you that the Italian campaign was a pretty unpleasant one. On the left, you've got sunny Italy, and on the right, the German propaganda, which is to scare the hell out of British soldiers going to Italy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that for me, this really sums up the Italian campaign, because I mean, on the left, you know, everybody who's watching this is well aware of the D-Day Dodgers tune and being out in sunny Italy, etc. And you've got that sort of picturesque postcard travel brochure there. But it was probably one of the most horrific campaigns. I mean, you know, all war is horrific, but I think in Italy, given what they faced there, the diversity of climate, the environment, the geography, and you know, the fact that the entire breadth of the country with the Apennine Mountains running from.
Oh my goodness! Sorry, Gareth. Keep going. Sorry, that was my fault.
No, it's okay.
Right, I'm going to move on to the next slide. So this shows you the topography of Italy. You can see the leg of Italy. If you look at the one, I mean, the one on the left shows that's climate, I think.
Yes, it is. It's the Köppen climate.
On the right, it's the topography or the mountains. You can see the majority of Italy is mountains.
Absolutely, and I think this is it really. I think, you know, I think strategically and tactically, I don't think we were really prepared to fight in Italy. If I'm honest, I think that, you know, evidently there was a number of drivers for it. You've got an army in Tunisia. The Germans are defeated. Well, let's go to Sicily. You go to Sicily. Well, you've got your sort of your foot on the toe of Italy. Well, let's go to Italy. But I'm not so sure they really. There are numerous drivers for wanting to do so. Take Rome, you take Italy out of the war. You know, the strategic objective, obviously, to take Rome, to have air bases in Foggia to enhance the strategic air campaign. I think, you know, there's numerous reasons for doing so, but I mean, to invade Italy from the tip of the toe, and I do appreciate why that happened, because of fighter cover. And you know, Salerno was probably the most northern sort of area that you could have fighter cover. But I mean, when you look at that topographic map there, I mean, it's almost insane, isn't it? And what we must remember here as well is that, you know, the fighting largely in North Africa is a very mobile style of fighting. You've got the 6th Armored Division then, which was probably, you know, later on in the campaign in Italy, probably Alexander's sort of ideal corps de chasse, if you like. And essentially the infrastructure of Italy, the very few metal roads, you know, the weather, the fact that you can only advance on the coasts really, because most of the center of Italy is pretty much impenetrable to armored vehicles. And, you know, when you consider how many vehicles an armored division or indeed an infantry division would have, you know, then you overlay that against the climate. So, you know, off those mountains that are rivers that flow regularly down on both sides to the Mediterranean and the Adriatic. And then, you know, you've got really, really, really hot, dry weather at the south, illustrated by the Köppen climate chart on the left-hand side there. It's really dry, it's very hot. And then as you move up, as I've experienced quite recently, having visited sort of Tuscany 2 weeks ago, as you move up, then it changes dramatically. So your actual needs of your fighting men change with that environment. I think they come across from Tunisia, albeit they're immediately thrust, and I'm jumping ahead now, and I'll come on to that in a second. They're immediately thrust into really cold conditions in the Gargliano salient south of Cassino there. And then all of a sudden, come June, they're in 40+ degree heat in central Tuscany. So I just think it's a really, really difficult environment to fight in, both because of the geography and because of the weather, and because that weather and environment changes very, very quickly. And of course, with the mountains there, the Germans, it gives the Germans the absolute ideal defense, essentially, insofar that they everything is under observation at all times. The rivers make it really difficult. So they get to a bridge, get across the river, Germans blow it, they can concentrate artillery, then they can move back and fight again. It's horrific. And just moving back to what I was saying, and this is some of the narrative here around that innovation that I alluded to earlier. So, for example, you find the 1st Guards Brigade are sent to Italy on the 5th of February, and essentially, it's not armor that Alexander wants in Italy. He wants the division's infantry and the division's artillery. What we can see here is that obviously this came from the reorganization of Formation's war diary, and it's a series of letters that start on the 16th of January, and it's covered in the book. But essentially, Alexander is saying, I don't really need armor in Italy at the moment. What I really could do with is more infantry, and what he wanted to do is break up certain armored formations to create a Guards infantry division in Italy. Now, I don't know whether this has been published previously, but it's certainly something that I found out, and that sort of gives you a bit of an idea of what Alexander's intentions were. And this goes back and forth for some time. So the close proximity of the fighting in Italy means that, and the infrastructure, the weather, and everything else means that it's very difficult to deploy armor in a way that you could in North Africa, and also to take an objective usually involved winkling Germans off a hill, which really needed 2 brigades to achieve. So what Alexander was saying is that essentially you need to do a set piece attack with one, but you actually need another to mop up and support the armor. So then it was becoming very difficult to sort of borrow additional brigades to support another sort of brigade's attack. So he really wanted to change the way that this all worked. So if you flip it on to the next slide there, what happens is that this goes back and forth, and basically SIGs turn around and say, well, actually, we're not supportive of you breaking up the 6th Armour Division. But what they sort of negotiate on really is an agreement to attach an additional infantry brigade to armour divisions going forward. So on May the 29th, the 10th Rifle Brigade, which was already part of 6th Armour Division, the 2nd and the 7th Rifle Brigade battalions become the 61st Brigade, and this becomes then the de facto second infantry brigade. And this is something really, really different that doesn't really happen in other theatres. And of course, it happens with the 6 South Africans you've already mentioned in your introduction, the 24th Guards Brigade. They joined the 6 South Africans as that 2nd Infantry Brigade, and so on and so forth. So again, just going back to that sort of view of history of Italy being a fairly sort of colourless campaign, there's all of this innovation at the strategic level to try and overcome some of the challenges of fighting in that area, right the way down to the use of Italian camouflage smocks. And what this is showing here then is the makeup of 6th Armoured.
Just a word or two about the 6th Armoured Division. As I mentioned, my father's formation, which was London Irish Rifles and the Irish Brigade, initially was in 6th Armoured, and were transferred into in 78th Division when they were in Tunisia. So the 6th Armoured, what about its heritage background? It's always designed. It was an innovative, by the standards of the British Army. It was an innovation, wasn't it? It was
a lot of not just tanks, but also transport. So lorried infantry.
Yes.
It was supposed to be mobile, highly mobile, using tanks in an individual way. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely spot on, as you can see from the tactical symbols there. So 1st Guards Brigade is a lorry brigade, I suppose more akin to your sort of German Panzer Grenadiers, if you like. Then I think that's a concept that people are more familiar with. So
if you're looking at this image, you've got the green boxes.
Yes.
And the one to the left is got the detail of the guards, the 1st Guards. So you've got 3rd Battalion Grenadiers, 2nd Battalion Coldstream, 3rd Battalion Welsh, all in the infantry brigade, and then you had to the right another infantry formation in the form of the 61st, which is the Rifles.
That's correct.
Another elite regiment, the Rifles.
Oh, absolutely. And what's really interesting is that only the 10th Battalion, the Rifle Brigade, actually keep their lorried status. The other two, the 2nd and the 7th, have reconverted back to normal infantry brigades, normal infantry battalions. So they're not lorried at all. And that was because they just didn't have the trucks. And the SIGs were really not keen on deploying additional lorried infantry because they just didn't have the resources to be able to do that.
And as you can see, the yellow boxes that's the 26th Armoured Brigade. And you've got the 16th Lancers, which is a Household Division, which is elite.
Yes.
You've got the 17th, no, the Lancers aren't Household Division. No, you've got the 16th, 5th Lancers, 17th, 21st Lancers, and the 2nd Lothian Border Horse, which is a Scottish tank.
That's right.
They were cavalry formations that got rid of their horses and got tanks in place. Anyway, so that's very interesting. Let's move on to another slide.
So this is essentially
a more detailed explanation of the 1st Guards Brigade. So you've got 3 columns of colours. You've got the 3rd Battalion, the Grenadier Guards on the left, 2nd Battalion, the Coldstreams in the middle, and the Welsh Guards on the right. And you've got the structure, which is underneath all that. You've got the company structure. Anyway, explain away.
It's quite interesting, actually, because what happens, and this is another level of innovation, tactical innovation, is that if we take the Guards, they come to 1st Guards Brigade, are deployed independently and attached to the 46th Division to go and fight in the Gargliano salient south of Cassino in early February 1944. That fighting was so ferocious that they ended up taking significant levels of casualties. Notwithstanding that, they also took significant casualties from exposure and frostbite because of the conditions. So they literally leave Tunisia, get on a boat, come off at Naples. Naples is destroyed. They go up to the hills of Monte Ornito, Cerasola, and it's freezing. And you've got really determined resistance there. So it was so determined that in an account by a chap called Adam Robson, who writes prolifically about the Coldstream Guards, they fired more mortar rounds in 10 days on Monte Ornito than they did in the entire Tunisian campaign, just to give you an idea of what that looks like. Now, firing all those mortar rounds as well, that means that mules have got to bring them up because the resupply route for that mountain is about 6-7 hours by mule, which also means that if you get wounded on the top, you've got to be brought down by that mule. So the fighting was that ferocious that the Coldstream Guards, they lose an entire rifle company up there. And the IRTD, the infantry sort of reinforcement and training depot for the Guards, didn't have any more Coldstream Guards that they could draft in to make up that rifle company. So what they did is they had a perfectly good Scots Guard company, and they attached that Scots Guard company to the Coldstream Guards Battalion, and that was S Company. And it was meant to be a bit of an experiment, and nobody knew whether it would succeed or not. And it was very, very successful, and indeed S Company stayed with them for some 12 months. Now, this you see happening in northwestern Europe, but it happened first with the 1st Guards Brigade. It happened also with the Welsh Guards. So they took very, very heavy casualties at a place called Monte Piccolo near Arce, and they actually drafted in a company of Grenadier Guards to become another rifle company to make up the numbers. So again, this sort of innovation, this was the first time that this was ever done.
Okay, well, this is the boat that the 1st Guards Brigade landed in Naples on the 5th of February, the Ville d'Oran. So you can see the map there shows you where Naples is, marked with a cross.
Yeah, indeed. And if you just want to skip it on to the next slide, so here we are. Then here's the Gargliano salient. So that's a Welsh Guards camp there. When you actually sort of look at the photo really closely, and I appreciate it's quite small on screen there, probably for some people, but you can see they're drying all their great coats, etc., and their ground sheets. That's a first aid post there in the second, but you can see the terrain. It's very rocky. You can see a patrol moving off in the background there. It was a shock to the system, and the guardsmen in the writing, they say it's probably the worst experience they had in Italy was up on those hills. They were up there when Vesuvio erupted, so they had a panoramic view of that, of course, as well. But they took significant casualties. Really difficult place to fight there on the Gustav Line.
Right, let's moving on. This is the we covered the Casino Line battle in Battles Quite Detail in May. So these photographs on the right, is that are these guards?
Yeah, they're guards. They're Welsh Guards there on the right. They're going on a patrol. That's dated the 19th of May. And of course, you can sort of tell that by the fact that they're actually up and about, if you like, because, they kind of lived a troglodyte style existence there. So the 1st Guards Brigade, they did 2 stints at Casino in April and in May, and their objective on both accounts was to hold the town. So you can see here, and this is just a point of interest there, the photograph with the Brengen and the picture of Hitler, that's actually annotated in the war diary, that they used to do this sort of thing to taunt the Germans, to get them to show their position, and then they'd fire Piats into the buildings to get at them, and it's actually recorded in the war diary, so I thought that was quite an amusing story that people might not be aware of. But if you want to just go on to the next slide.
You can see from the photograph, it's taken from basically Casino Town up to Castle Hill. So that's right. All that was left at Casino the 19th of May. And this is more detail of where the guards were deployed. I can see exactly, that's Castle Hill, the photograph with the Monte Cassino behind. And on the right, you've got a wonderful aerial photograph taken before the Battle Casino, locating exactly where the guards were.
That's right. Now, on that far right-hand flank there, at the bottom of the castle, were the Welsh Guards' position, and they initially shared a HQ between the location of the jail and the crypt then, if you like. Yeah. But the patrol route that my grandfather spoke to me about this was up that. In the second photo there, you can see Castle Hill, and you can see the sort of, I'm trying to think of the word, the ravine point then, but that was a patrol route for the Welsh Guards, so they actually had ropes that were anchored in there, and they would go up and down to Castle Hill. So that was their patrol route. And I remember my Daki then, which is Welsh for grandfather then, he used to tell me they used to navigate from the smells of the bodies in Casino, and that they would know at what waypoint, because obviously it's pitch black there, and that's how they would navigate. And then they would hold the ropes and be really, really quiet to get up to the castle, patrol, and go back. It's astonishing. I've not been to Casino, but it is on my bucket list.
Yeah, well, it's changed a lot, doesn't it? Look anymore. Completely flattened. And then, of course, we covered this as well, the breakout, and this shows the line of advance of the 6th Armoured with the Guards Brigade heading down the Leary Valley, over past Aquino and past Roccasecca on the right. Yeah, anything to say about that?
So the picture there is an interesting one, because that's the first actual photograph I've been able to find to date the fact that the Grenadier Guards, then our 1st Guards Brigade, that's the first picture of the smocks in use, and that was taken just on the other side of the Melfa. And they are the 3rd Grenadier Guards, and I think that was taken, if I remember, on the 25th of May off the top of my head. But that's the first actual picture of them being worn. And you can also see, I'm not quite so sure how good the resolution is for some, but the helmet net being worn by the chap in the front there is actually a face veil that's been wrapped around the helmet. But yeah, that's the first bit where they use smocks. And of course, what happens then is that they move into very, very close country. So in Casino, we see them in battle dress. We see them wearing plimsolls on patrol for silent movement. We see them with sandbags, and indeed that photo 2 slides ago is showing them putting sandbags over their boots or indeed wearing plimsolls for silent patrol. And now they're into a completely different type of countryside, which is a completely different challenge, close, green. So of course they're issued these camouflage smocks, which is all covered in the book. And there's a bit of rationale around that, around the fact that they were mitigating in advance, if you like. And I think that strategically they were already aware that the environment was changing and that it would be too hot for battle dress, that KDs simply wouldn't cut it. So they start issuing this clothing, which shows again that really interesting innovation throughout the campaign, really.
Well, you can see the 6th Armoured, and they followed. The Canadians broke the Hitler line near Aquino, and then pressed onto the Melfa, and then the 6th Armoured took over the advance down the valley.
That's right. And
this is further up the Leary Valley. This is on the right, because the map, there was a sort of Leary Valley, which is low ground, but on the right there's high ground, including the hills of Monte Piccolo and Monte Grande. If you see in the map, you can see Monte Piccolo, which means little hill, and Monte Grande means big hill. Now tell us about what happened there at the end of May.
Well, it's a very interesting story. So the photograph on the bottom left there, that is the Sherman of the 2nd Lothian Border and Borders and the Welsh Guards moving up. So essentially they get so far, and then they realise they send out a scouting party into the gap then between Monte Grande, Piccolo, and Monte Provedero. My Italian pronunciation is terrible, so please forgive me. And they start taking fire, and they realise that the Germans, the Paras, are holding those hills. So what you have then is a bit of a quick set-piece attack then, where the Grenadiers are sent into Grande, the Coldstream Guards onto Piccolo, and then indeed the Welsh Guards into Provedero. And that's a 3 or 4 day fight. And the Welsh Guards, they lose an entire rifle company at that point. Now, Monte Piccolo was actually taken by the Welsh Guards in the end. And actually the picture on the right-hand side there, which is depicting the Scots Guard, and I can't remember the chap's name now, but I did visit him at Indicatore Cemetery in Arezzo, the regimental sergeant major. Then he won I think it was a DCM for that action, rallying the Scots Guards, but the Welsh Guards moved through that attack and then took the hills. And as the Germans did, they very quickly sort of disappeared to fight another day. But they were stuck there for 4 days. And essentially that pass was the only way to roam via the Via Castellina, so they had to take it. And I think this is a bit of an ongoing, almost tragedy with the fighting in Italy, is that these men are having to sort of dig from the well of courage to take that next hill, next village constantly. And this was a significant engagement for the Guards.
So after that, the 6th Armoured was, and it was the 78th Division was also, my father's division, was also piling up, heading towards Perugia. I think the 78th Division was in the lead at this point by the time we got to Trasimeno. So you see the map there, it's Largo Trasimeno, and the main German defensive line was actually to the left. It blocked Highway 71 that went up the west side of Lake Trasimeno to Florence. That was the main route, and that's when this is the Albert Line, and I've detailed that in previous programs, the battle for the Albert Line, the breaking the Albert Line. So the 6th Armoured at this point, were they leading or were they following?
They were leading, and they go off to the right to actually.
I think what happened, I think the 6th Armoured took over the lead from the 78th.
Yes.
So once the Albert Line was broken near Castigliano di Largo, the 6th Armoured then led the advance. So you've got, well, that's a photograph of Arche, which is actually
yes.
south.
I've used that photo because it depicts that, I suppose, is the best sort of depiction of the scale of and speed of movement of the chase. Then, because Arche, they cover hundreds of miles in a month, and the next major engagement for them is at Perugia. Now, unfortunately, I didn't get to spend much time in Perugia, aside from flying into the airport there, but it's certainly somewhere I'm going to return to. But the Guards take Perugia after a real fight, and then they have another major engagement at a place called Montepulciano, which is just to the north of Perugia. So the Germans are holed up there. So on this map, it's difficult to sort of see it, and you probably can't see my cursor now, but it's just north of Perugia. So they have a major engagement there on the last week of June. And again, you know, like I said, it's another sort of example of them just sort of another hill, another engagement, retreating Germans, and then after that they're pulled off the line, so they move then to the west of Trasimeno, and I really like these pictures because this is my grandfather's company. So this is number 1 company, Welsh Guards, taken somewhere on the 11th of July near Cortona, and we can see here in the front page of Sharples, and we can see them singing. And I love the caption, and I posted this on Twitter recently. And it says that they're preparing for the Florence Eisteddfod. And for people who don't know what an Eisteddfod is, it's essentially a Welsh sort of folk singing, writing, bardic recitals, etc. But my grandfather would have definitely have been in this crowd because there's a photograph of him taken, and I've recognised some of the other chaps who are in these photos. If you want to just flip it on one slide there.
Well, obviously, for connoisseurs of Guards formations, this is going to fill them full of excitement because there they are, the Guards, famous for their drill and discipline, marching perfectly, looking extremely smart despite everything, some with berries, some with their soft hats. And then the officer at the front, don't know what rank he is, he's got his Guards Major leading the company on, and then, of course, having a sing-song. Anyway, next slide. Oh, great.
So that photograph there, I've identified some of the guys in the other photographs. So it's taken on the same day. So my grandfather is 4th from the left on the back row there. So, and on the back of the photograph, and I'm really lucky to have this, is it's presented, you know, courtesy of Major Sharples, who was the major for number 1 company. He's a really interesting bloke himself, and regrettably he was assassinated in 1973 as the governor of Bermuda. But it's great to finally piece those Army Film and Photographic Unit photos with an individual photo. And I really love this picture because, I mean, like you say, the Guards have got such etiquette, etc. But yet what you can see here is a real mishmash of different uniforms. Some of them have got blanket weapons, some haven't. Some of them have got berets, some are in service caps. Some, you know, it's brilliant. I love it. But I mean, I'm really, really glad to have that.
It's a lovely photograph because I mean, it's like a black and white version of a photograph you could take today.
Yeah.
So right now we come up towards Arezzo, and this is where your visit was last week. So you've got the map on the right, you've got the arrows, so that's the road. So Todi up to Perugia, then to the left of Trasimeno, and then took over the advance towards Arezzo. And you've got the actual contour map on the left, and what you've put in red. Tell us what the red circle is. I think, isn't that Montelignano?
It is Montelignano, and there's the panoramic photo of it on the bottom right, as taken from the hotel that we were lucky to stay at about 10 days ago. And essentially, what happens here is that the Germans have basically formed a defensive line across Montelignano there. And whilst those photographs of my grandfather marching and etc. were taken on the 11th of July, at that point the Rifle Brigade were up there taking really seriously heavy casualties. Nobody had been able to pot Montelignano at that point, and the entire sort of advance thereafter, because of the terrain of that area. Obviously, you can see the white bit on the relief map in the middle. That's the Val di Chiana, which is really, really flat plain with very large mountains on both sides. Like Montelignano is a good 700 meters there. So, you know, that they had to somehow take that hill to get into Arezzo, and I will get on to that in a second. But if you just want to move the slide along, Eddie. So, as we can see here in this photograph that, again, I took from the hotel, which was wonderful to be right in the smack bang in the centre of it, is that the defile in the middle there, you can see, is the Lolmo Pass, or the Lolmo Gap. And that is the only road into Arezzo that, you know, that they could have taken. So what happens is, and you've probably covered this already, so forgive me, you've got the first proper set piece attack that goes in against Lignano. So it's delayed until the 14th to get the New Zealanders. The New Zealanders go up and take the summit of Lignano. Then you've got the Coldstream and the Grenadier Guards who go up onto the sort of the spur coming down from Lignano. And you've got the Welsh Guards then that move to take the pass. So the Coldstream and the Grenadiers go up to a place called Stobiaci Farm. it's on another map in a second. And then the Welsh Guards go in and they literally take the two hills straddling the Lolmo Pass to eject the Germans off the hill. It's quite a good plan as well, because on that hill it divides. It was the divisional boundary for the Germans, so they exploited that. And I mean, it was the first time they used. They took even all the company commanders up in spotted aircraft to make sure that everybody. It was a proper set piece attack, and the first one that they'd done since Tunisia. So if you just want to move it on one slide there. So this is the route that the Welsh Guards take. So you can see the forming up point near their billets at Polciano, and they move up through where the first arrow ends there. That's where the Coldstream and the Grenadiers are. They have a really terrible time, but the Welsh Guards are able to pass through there with no opposition at all. They then take two objectives: Villa Paradiso, which is an absolutely beautiful, massive villa on the top of the convent. And then they go down the Lolmo Pass, down the hill to cross Route 71, and then take the hill on the other side at 5 o'clock in the morning. And what that enables then is they hold that pass, which enables the 17th 21st Lancers to roll into Arezzo with the 10 Rifle Brigade behind them. So it's the 17th 21st and 10 Rifle Brigade actually take the town. But that was enabled by this set piece attack to hold those two key hills at both sides of the Lolmo Pass, and that was achieved by the Welsh Guards. So evidently, I wanted to go there and walk that ground and see it, and that's what I did. So
I'll take it. Next slide.
So
okay.
This is where this is my obsession, I suppose, with the fighting around Arezzo. This is the photograph of my great grandfather that I alluded to at the start of our talk then, and you can see him there sat forth from the left, and this is right in the middle of the sort of Lolmo Pass, right at the side of what was then Route 71. And this photograph was the genesis for my book and my sort of 2 years worth of rabbit holes sort of research into a specific piece of camouflage clothing. But I mean, the book is much wider than that and covers a lot of the things that I've been discussing here today. So I just wanted to go back there. So I went back to the exact site. I don't know whether you want to move it on one, Eddie. I went back to the exact site that photograph was taken at the same time on the 16th of July this year. I was stood there, 8 years to the day that my grandfather was there, and I mean, it was an absolutely incredible experience to do that. And Eddie, I've seen from your Twitter feed that you've done much the same with photographs of your grandfather.
Yes. Oh, no, Dad.
Oh, Dad. Yeah.
You're a lot younger than me, Gareth. Yeah, wonderful stuff. So this is some of the Villa Paradiso. I'm just going to press ahead a little bit now.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Villa Paradiso, as you mentioned, and then on the right, this is what you found at Monte Lignano. What did you find up there?
Yeah, well, these are the objectives that they took, and essentially the detritus of war is everywhere up there. And I'm really grateful to a friend of mine, Orazio, who lives in Arezzo, for taking me to these places. But I mean, what you've got there is a 2-inch mortar tail fin, a 2-inch mortar fuse that's exploded. Then you've got the 2-inch mortar cover for the cardboard tubes that carry the bombs up to the top there, and the tail caps for the caps that cover the sort of initial detonation charge which fires the mortar.
And these are things that you spotted when you were there.
Yeah, the detritus of war is everywhere there. It's unbelievable.
Exactly. It's the Lothian and Border Horse, as you explained, as we discussed, is one of the battalions, the armoured battalions, tank battalions that supported 6th Armoured. So tell us about this slide.
Well, this is really interesting as well, because this was 150 meters from the hotel that we were staying in. And I don't know if some of your listeners or viewers today have read Casino to the River Pol by G.W. Martin. It's an excellent book that covers the exploits of the Lothian and Border Horse in Italy. And this bit is actually mentioned in his book. So on the 7th of July, they are tasked to move up towards Arezzo with a squadron of Shermans to make as much dust as they possibly could, because there were a couple of German self-propelled artillery guns hiding on the back end of Monte Lignano that were causing all sorts of problems. So they wanted to create a dust cloud to attract the fire of those self-propelled artillery pieces, so that the spotted planes could find them and engage them with counter-battery fire. So this all happened 150 meters from where I was staying. So they move across. You can see the objective there on the map and how they move. But they move across this field to generate this dust. And you can see in the second photo on the top right there, my little hired Fiat Panda, was amazing at producing dust clouds there. Imagine what a squadron of Shermans would have looked like. They then roll up to the photograph beneath that and park their tanks right by that the gable end of that house there, and realize the bridge on the photo on the left has been blown, which is a good 50, 60 feet down to the canal there. And indeed, they get engaged by those artillery guns, and they're taken out by counter artillery fire. Really poignantly as well. There was a thistle growing right on the bank then, and it was just surreal to be able to go there, because I'm such a 6th Armored Division nerd and I read so widely. Any opportunity to see an actual sort of tactical engagement right there, right up and close. But I'll post about this again. But I just had to include it here today, because indeed there will be many people who will be interested in that.
Well, these the Sayre part. Which cemetery were these photographs taken?
This was taken at Indicatore Cemetery in Arezzo, just northwest of Arezzo there. And it's a really sad case, really. So the first grave on the left there, Sergeant Evans, he was killed during that assault that I outlined to take the Lolmo Pass. And he was killed by our own guns. 25-pounder salvo came in, and there was a number of casualties, and he regrettably died in that sort of accident, if you like, then. And the other chaps there, the second, Lieutenant Hall, Guardsman Thomas, and Guardsman Wilkinson, they were killed, and the account is in the war diary there at the top, whilst they were moving up towards Florence. And what I just wanted to do is go to that cemetery and mark my respects, and I gave a cross and a little bit of a Welsh language inscription to each of them there. So I did that. I thought it was really important to go there. But that cemetery it's a beautiful cemetery, but it's absolutely full of, as you would expect, New Zealanders, 6th Armored Division, Rifle Brigade, and strangely Lovett Scouts and a whole host of other nations, South Africans. But I just had to go there and pay my respects. And if you want to just move on one slide, this was something really special. So a friend of mine, Nigel Warwick, who indeed he wrote the foreword for my book, his cousin Alan was killed. He was number 2 Gren Company attached to the Welsh Guards, formerly of 201st Guards Brigade, and he was killed by artillery fire. So I just wanted to go there and take a photograph for him, and it was just an amazing experience just to leave him a bit of a message there. And of course, the war diary entry at the bottom there says what happened to him and where it happened. But it's something really personal when it's somebody's relative, and I was out there to see the sites of where my great-grandfather fought, and indeed, I wanted to do something for Nigel as well and take that back there for his cousin.
Well, obviously, you have to take the family back next time. Now you've done the groundwork, because these are really extraordinarily moving. And I think for a lot of people, I mean, it strikes me as extraordinary. There are so many people lost their lives in the Second World War, and you think their children, grandchildren would like to know more, surely, about the stories of the men who came back and the men who didn't. So that's a wonderful piece of work there. Terrific. Next slide. So then we've got the push to Florence. So tell us about that photograph in the middle. Who are these splendid looking chaps? Guardsmen, I assume.
Yes, my great-grandfather there, back right again. But this photo is really interesting, because on a couple of sort of World War II forums, World War II talk then specifically, this seems to be a very popular photograph studio with the Guards, because I've seen a couple of relatives who've got these photos with the exact same wallpaper in the background. But I just like that photo. It's a photographic studio in Florence. I found the name out, but I couldn't find it in time for the slide deck to complete this morning. But you can see the mixture of uniform that they're wearing. You've got austerity battle dress. You've got 1940 style battle dress. You've got berets. They're there in very, very nice, neatly.
I am right in saying the gentleman wearing the tie would be a warrant officer, wouldn't he?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, a warrant officer, that is sergeant major or higher. You're allowed to wear a tie. If you didn't, you weren't allowed. That was the British dress code. And the picture on the right shows you the kind of countryside that they were facing.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
and you know, essentially then they move up through Florence, through Di Camarno, and they find themselves at a very, very miserable place called Monte Battaglia.
Yeah.
That they actually take these positions off. I think it was the 88th American Division. I think it was the 88th, but it was certainly an American division up there. And
So,
they had,
I think at this point, anyway, I think under American command, I think you'll find.
yes, they are.
Just want to move along because this is going too far in the future. We are, and then out of line retreat. This is in Florence. This is in the winter of 1944 when they were taken out and they enjoyed a bit of relaxation. I see that's picture on the left. That is Florence, is it?
It's Grieve. It's Grieve, southwest of Florence, and a real massive sort of shout out here. But these are never before seen photographs. So these are private photographs from a collection of a mate of mine who's very, very gratefully allowed me to copy them. So I'm going to publish them in my next book, but more on that in the future.
Lovely, and yeah, I hope you don't mind. Yeah, this is the winter of 1944. You can see by now. Is that the Grenadier Guards with skis?
Yes, it is Grenadier Guards on Pensacola Ridge, and I'm really lucky. The map on the left, that's actually all of the maps that I've shown there are mine, but I'm particularly proud of this one because this is a defence overlay map, and the Guards are on Pensacola, Acquasalata, and Vero for 3 months in really bitter winter conditions. And that shows the German positions as of, I think it was the 24th of January. So I'm really
well. The Acquasalata, which is on the right, and we were there last year filming.
Yeah, fantastic.
And to the left, if you see Spinella, do you see? If you go sort of northwest, you see Spinello. There's a farmhouse there, which is a major battle for the London Irish Rifles and the Irish Brigade.
Yeah,
so that whole area is. You don't want to go in there in winter. In summer, it's not too bad. And if you're going there, I can help. I can set you up with the local museum, Castel del Rio, which is about 15 minutes drive. They'd be fascinated to meet you.
I would love to go there. And again, look at the terrain again. You know, so you've got hot, dusty Casino, you've got Tuscany and Umbria, and when we were there last week, it was 42 degrees. Unbelievable. You know, how could they fight in that weather? And into sub-zero conditions on mountains again. It's just horrific.
Yeah, they wasn't. Yeah, and then we've got the final battles, which is crossing the River Po, which takes us up to April. I hope you don't mind if I think, yeah, that's. I mean, that is such a way where I mean, that is another 50 episodes away from me. So
no, it's no problem. And it's just the point there, I suppose, to illustrate is that the Guards were the first to cross the Po. So it was the Grenadier Guards. They were the actual first.
Is that to the right of Ferrara, isn't it?
Yes, it's to the left of Ferrara.
No, because I've been there. I've been to the exact spot because a bridge was built, I think, close to this spot, and you can see there's photographs of the area. So, goodness me, there's so lots of things to talk about. Gareth.
Yeah, there's tons. I just thought I'd take you on a bit of a whistle-stop tour of the 6th Armored Division in Italy and throw in some facts and figures. And
no, that is absolutely fantastic. And let's see what I can do here. So it's just us. Really fascinating story, and what a contribution. So, right, so that's it. So what's the next project, Gareth? What are you working on? You've just done your book. So what else? So you're talking about the possibility of hosting a talk or a mini conference at the Militaria Via in Brecon.
Yes, well, I'm certainly going to have a chat with the organisers there, because I think there's an opportunity there to sort of highlight some stuff that Welsh boys did in Italy, and I mean there's a really fantastic Militaria show there, so there's a captive audience, so that's something I'm really keen to do. I think allied to that, then I think that there's not that much information out there on the Welsh Guards in Italy, and I've had so many requests for information from family members, etc., that I intend to try and put that right. And I think I'm just going to do it to myself again and do an operational history of the 3rd Welsh Guards in Italy as a book.
Obviously there's a lot of great stories to be told, family stories, personal stories. There's obviously the Welsh Guards, but you also had other Welsh regiments in Italy and elsewhere. And then, of course, you had a lot of Welsh soldiers, people from Wales, who found themselves in other British Army formations. So my father's Irish Brigade, when they were replacing casualties, they just took people from anywhere. So famously, there's my father's company commander for a period was Mervyn Davis, Swansea, Royal Welsh Regiment. So, and Raymond Phillips, who played a very significant role in one major Irish Brigade battle in Tunisia, Welsh. There were a lot of Welsh boys in it. So I think I think there's a big story to be told of the Irish soldier in the Second World War. I think now's the time to do it, Gareth, because we're in the period when we're leading up to what is called VE Day. So the next 10 months or so, there'll be a lot of interest in afterwards. And I think it's a great opportunity for you to tell the story. I think who else could do it better than you? The story of Welsh regiments, not just the Welsh Guards and Welsh soldiers in the Second World War. I think you'll find there'll be a lot of interest. As you know, as I think I've told you, that I'm of Irish descent, but born in England, but I am Welsh by marriage.
That's the best way. That's the
well,
best.
I'm not sure if it's the best way, but it certainly it forced me to support the Welsh rugby team.
Good on you. Good on you.
And I think the Welsh story in the Second World War, because there's a huge story. I mean, Swansea was very heavily bombed. The role of the industries in supporting it, the women who served in the ATS, the Air Force, the convoy duties, and then of course the Welsh boys who are out in all over the world. So I wish you every possible success in your future endeavours. Hope to meet you in person in due course. So Gareth, thank you very much.
You're very, very welcome, and thank you for the opportunity to come on and ramble on about all things 6th Armour Division related. Thank you.
Well, that's it for this week. A really terrific story about someone with a real expertise in a particular formation. And what I liked about it most of all is this very personal connection. So it's more than military history. It's actually a family story. And amazing that two grandfathers, both in the Welsh Guards, and then survived the war, came back and could tell their story. So anyway, that's it for this week. We'll be back next week with another This Week in the Italian campaign. Next week, we'll be dealing with the liberation of Florence, which was captured in mid-August, and the preparations for the attack on the Gothic Line. So there's a lot more to go through. So until then, from everybody here at the Irish Brigade, from everybody here at This Week in the Italian campaign, I want to say goodbye, good luck, and may God bless you all.